This is the 3D printer. This is the laser. This is the CNC machine. This is the Snapmaker. Here I am, after playing with the Snapmaker for about 3 months, and I can already tell you I really liked the machine. But in order to give you a more detailed answer, we have to go back in time to the day when I got the package. But firstly I have to somehow take this box, which is quite heavy. I mean, it's even really heavy, I would say. I have to somehow take this box to my workshop. So, let's go. Somehow I made it to the workshop, so now we can see what's inside the box. Everything came in a really huge box, in a really heavy box, but it was super nicely and safely packed. Inside the box I found smaller boxes with nice labels, with nice drawings. Really good job on the packaging so far. The instruction, super detailed, super clear, easy to follow with nice pictures, not too much text. Really the instruction was like perfect. So the assembly process of this printer was absolutely amazing. I felt like a 6-year-old kid assembling Lego bricks again, and it was great. Everything is super solid, made out of aluminum, there are no plastic parts, and the power supply is great. I kind of would like this thing to be attached to the main body, but it's fine, it looks awesome. You know, the linear rails, there are no bolts, there are screws inside these modules. This is great. And the screen, are you ready? It's magnetic. The screen is magnetic, you can just take it out, you can click something there, and you can put it back in place, and it's magnetic. It took me about an hour to assemble the main frame, and here is a very interesting thing to point out. This machine is very modular. For example, the linear module, it is exactly the same for each axis, for X, Y and Z axis. You have actually 2 linear modules for Z and Y and just 1 for the X-axis, so that's total of 5 linear modules, and they're exactly the same. So good job on like making the machine modular, and the design itself, like, it's super minimalistic without too much. I really like this kind of approach of design. As you can see, after the assembly, the machine is pretty big. That's actually the biggest 3D printer I've ever used. It's even bigger than CR10, but that's a good thing. That's actually the biggest model. They also have smaller modules. This one is called A350. And you have also 2, I think, smaller ones, so we can check it out, but this is huge. Except for the machine, you can find in the box a lot of tools and accessories, and all of those tools are nicely organized in a plastic box. And this plastic box perfectly fits on the side of the machine. You can of course also find 1 kilogram of filament, safety glasses for a CNC machine, safety glasses for a laser, and there are some other accessories, and of course 3 tool heads. Let's start with 3D printing, because I think this is the easiest thing to start with. And as you can see, I printed quite a lot of things. I tested it with different materials, I tested what it can and cannot print, and I have to say I'm quite happy with what it can print, how it can print it. The software is great. It's called Snapmaker Luban. It's made based on the CNC.js that I'm using for my CNC machines, so I am quite familiar with the software. Actually, the Snapmaker Luban has all the 3 things built into it, so you can control the CNC machine, the laser and 3D printer. Of course, there is already the slicer, so you can slice everything in this software. You also can send every file through Wi-Fi, so you actually don't have to run with an SD card or a USB stick. You can just wirelessly transmit it from your computer to the printer. When it comes to actually printing, this printer is loud, that's definitely true. I am loading the filament now. It's way louder than other 3D printers these days, but it is actually not that terrible at the same time. And also I think it's just a bit slower, compared for example to Ender 3, where you have bells. Right here in this printer you have screws. I think it cannot print as fast as Ender 3, but again, it's not really that terrible, and you can print some big objects like this vase in the vase mode, and yes, vase mode is also built into the Snapmaker Luban. This thing took about 7 hours to print, and I would say the quality is really nice. The layers are perfect. On the top there was kind of a problem, but maybe that's a problem with filament on the printer, because on the bottom it looks amazingly good and it was printed with PETG. This vase right here was printed with PLA. That was actually, I think, the second print, printed with the filament provided by the producer. And it also works fine, but you can see that the quality of the filament is really not that great. And here I have the small vase that was actually the first print on this printer, and that was printed with the G-code provided by the Snapmaker already on the printer. I also of course printed the benchy as always with PLA. I also tried printing with ABS and that worked really nicely. I've never really tried printing with ABS at home before, so it was nice to try it. Then I printed again with PLA this thing just to see how it will take the print in place thing. And the last thing that I printed, it's Christmas time right now, so I designed myself a small Christmas tree printed with PLA. It took 20 something hours because this thing is pretty thick and pretty big. And this thing is composed of two parts. We have the white PLA part and green PLA part, and as you can see inside I have an LED strip. So actually you can power that, light it up, and it looks pretty cool. It's a nice little Christmas tree. So again, printing quality really perfect. I also tried printing with flexible filament, and unfortunately I wasn't really that lucky to get it working. Maybe it is possible with some different kind of filament, flexible filament, but actually with the filament that I tried, it's really flexible. It wasn't possible to get it working. That's probably because of how the extruder is designed. And of course it has all of the features you would expect from a 3D printer nowadays. It has an auto bed leveling, you have the filament runout protection, which is pretty cool because it is built into the extruder, so there is no like additional part that you have to put the filament through. And also of course you have the power down recovery option, which is always useful. Overall, I am really happy with the 3D printing capabilities of this machine. Of course, it's not the fastest 3D printer, of course it is quite loud and it cannot print flexible filament. But remember that this is not only a 3D printer. So now let's take a look at the laser. I think that's enough of 3D printing on the Snapmaker. I really printed a lot of things. It took me a lot of time, and finally it's time to change the tool head to the laser tool head and we'll laser some stuff. So I have to replace the tool head itself, and I have to replace the table. Unfortunately, it takes some time to swap the table, especially because for the tool head it's just 4 screws. For the table it's a lot of screws. It's about 20 screws that you need to unscrew and screw back in place to change the table for the vector table for a laser. But you have a vector table, which is pretty cool because it's easier to cut through materials with a vector table. Very important thing when working with the lasers: safety glasses for the laser. Appropriate safety glasses for each laser, in this case provided by the Snapmaker. You should always put them on even if the machine is not cutting yet or engraving, and you have a reminder on the screen every time you start a new job. Put them on because lasers are really dangerous for eyes. The power of the laser is 1.6 watts. Definitely not a lot if you want to cut stuff, but for engraving you can actually do some nice things. You can easily engrave on wood, plywood, probably some kind of plastics. Stuff like this will work fine. When it comes to cutting, you can cut through paper, through cardboard as you can see right here, and you can also cut through thin plywood. Maybe even balsa wood will work, or if you are into making planes, maybe some kind of foam will work too. There are also some really nice auto calibration features on this machine. You have a camera built into the laser module, and thanks to this camera the laser can auto calibrate its focusing distance by engraving few lines at different heights, and then it is just choosing the best line based on the camera image. You can also take a picture of the whole working area, and you can see that picture in the software in the Snapmaker Luban, and you can precisely place your engraving or cutting where you want it to be on the material just by looking at the picture on the computer screen. That's a very useful feature. So what I tried to engrave, I of course tried to engrave on plywood, as you can see right here. I have a lot of different engravings, including those calibration things. This is logo of, let's say, my company. That's just me and my name. Here is the SpongeBob. I also tried cutting through, that's a 4mm plywood. Without any successes, even after 20 passes, which was quite a lot. I also tried engraving some Christmas things on the plywood, and that works really nicely. and I tried engraving and cutting my initials in a simple circle, but unfortunately that's 3mm plywood, and even after 8 passes I still wasn't able to go through the wool material. And then I grabbed the piece of plywood provided by the Snapmaker, the 1.5mm thick piece of plywood, and I tried to cut some Christmas ornaments out of this plywood, and this time that was a success. This is a really thin plywood, so I broke some pieces while taking this out, but yeah, it works, and after 3 passes I was able to go through this material, so that's pretty cool. And then there is the T-Rex head, made out of, are you ready for this? Old boxes. Like, you can use old Amazon boxes, like whatever you have, old cardboard, that's what I used to make this thing. It took me about 20 hours to cut all the pieces because there is like 120 pieces to make this T-Rex head, but I think it was totally worth it because the result is amazing. It looks cool, and that's a great example of what you can make with the laser. I have an idea. I almost forgot to tell you about the longboard that I wanted to engrave with this machine, and you may be like, a longboard, isn't that too long for the Snapmaker? Yes, it is. At the same time, because this is an open construction, you can easily fit longer objects on the work table of this machine. And that's exactly what I did. Unfortunately, I wasn't lucky to get it fully working. It was working fine up to some point. I wasn't able to balance the longboard at proper place on the table, so I ran out of the Y-axis space and the engraving is not finished, but it was working fine. So yes, you can engrave bigger objects like a longboard, skateboard, other longer things with the Snapmaker. And now it's time for CNC machining with the Snapmaker, but firstly we have to replace the tool head and the table. For the tool head just 4 screws, it's fast, but for the table again 20 something screws, so it takes time. But the table itself, it is really nicely made. You have the threaded insert and the clamping system is amazing. On the spindle you have ER11 collet. I am familiar with this thing because I am using this on my 500 watt spindle, on the Dremel CNC, on the Indie mill. It is working really nicely, and thanks to the ER11 collet you can actually use bigger or smaller milling bits. When it comes to the software, again, Snapmaker Luban is amazing. It has built-in cam generator. It is very easy to use, especially for beginners. You are not overwhelmed by a lot of features. You have everything that you seriously need to get started. You can like figure out how everything works and then move on to Fusion 360. But if you are experienced, it will definitely not be powerful enough. But for simple things, even things that I have made, I use the Snapmaker Luban for that, and it works really well. Of course, you can use Fusion 360 to machine stuff on the Snapmaker. We just need to add a special post-processor to Fusion 360, but it is very simple and very well explained on the internet, so that's not a problem. And then you can basically machine anything you design in Fusion 360 on the Snapmaker. As for the first material, I decided to go with MDF, as it is very easy to mill, and I designed the thing in Snapmaker Luban, so it took me like, I don't know, 2 minutes to design this thing and I was ready to machine. The surface finish on the outside looks really nice. On the inside, always with MDF, it is not that great. The spindle actually is not really that loud compared to 500 watt spindle, so the machine is loud as for a 3D printer, but definitely is not that loud as for a CNC machine. As for the second material, I decided to go with pine, and again a simple design in Snapmaker Luban. I imported the DXF from Inkscape and that's what I have. As you can see, the corners are not really that great, and that's because of how the Luban handles the pocket cuts, but on the outside we have a really nice surface finish. The next day I set up the Fusion 360 to work with the Snapmaker, and that's what I have made. You may recognize that from Dremel CNC videos or Indie mill test, and it works fine on the Snapmaker too. It took a little bit more time, but definitely the surface finish is really nice and it is totally possible to mill pine with this machine. And then it was time to mill plywood. Plywood that I used to build this little house, and this little house is actually just a piggy bank. And this is a 4mm thick plywood. I decided to go with the depth of cut of 1mm and feed rate of I think 900mm per minute, or maybe was it 800mm per minute, something like this. It really worked fine, and it is definitely possible and quite easy to mill plywood on the Snapmaker. Also, those windows that you see right there are machined on the Snapmaker 2 out of acrylic, the acrylic that I tried to laser engrave, but it wasn't possible. Fortunately, CNC machining the acrylic on the Snapmaker is totally possible. It is very easy to do, you have to be careful not to melt it. With single foot milling bit, it works great. Roof of the house is 3D printed. I wanted initially to make it also out of plywood, but it wasn't really looking that great, so I 3D printed that. And I think this is a really nice example of a project that you can totally make with Snapmaker only. You can print the roof, you can cut the plywood pieces, the acrylic pieces, and if you want you can like engrave stuff on the walls of this house, and you have a really nice piggy bank out of that. And then I've got an idea. Idea so stupid that I thought I just have to try it in order to prove to you that it is not possible to machine aluminum on the Snapmaker. I already like this machine a lot and I don't want to destroy it, but I guess I just have to find out if it will be able to at least scratch a little bit the aluminum. Maybe it will. At the step down of 0.1mm, I think it should be possible. So I grabbed a piece of aluminum, I put it on the table, I designed a simple circle again in Snapmaker Luban, and I just pressed start, and I was expecting to see milling bit breaking or the whole machine just blowing up. And you know what? It didn't happen. It actually worked really well, and the circle was totally fine. So after machining the circle and after noticing that, well, this machine actually can machine aluminum, this is pretty amazing as for such a machine, I thought I will machine something a little bit bigger. So then I thought I will machine a corner connector for aluminum profiles. I actually made the same thing with Indie Mill. It worked fine, so I just modified a G-code a little bit for the Snapmaker. I exported it, I started machining, drilling went fine, all the holes were there, and then it started machining the contour cut. And even before finishing one single pass of the contour cut, the milling bit broke. Why? Probably the feed rate was slightly too aggressive, so I lowered the feed rate, I put on the new milling bit and I started again. And after about 30 minutes, the part was ready. It was machined, aluminum machined on the Snapmaker, and it worked fine, without any problems. That was really amazing. Of course, I was able to machine this part on Indie Mill 5 times faster with 3 times bigger milling bit, but still, this is not only a CNC machine. This is a 3D printer, this is a laser, and this is a CNC machine, and this CNC machine can machine aluminum. That is really impressive. So overall, I really liked this machine. It is really powerful. I was afraid that it is not going to be that powerful, you know, machine that is like supposed to do 3 things at once, printing, lasering and CNC machining, can't really be that great, but actually it is pretty great. I really enjoyed using it. It is super simple thanks to the software. It is really well made. The design is like, it's really beautiful. But also there are things that I would like to complain about. Those are just small little things, but still those are there. First thing, the loose on the table. It's definitely there. Maybe it's not something that will influence 3D printing. It definitely will not influence lasering. But it may influence the CNC machining a little bit. Maybe that's just the case for my machine. I don't know, maybe I was pushing it too hard with the aluminum, but the loose is definitely there. Second thing is cable management. I heard some people saying that the cable management is amazing on this printer. Unfortunately, I can't agree with that. In my opinion, it is not really that perfect. On the right, it is just kind of fine. Okay, you have the connectors, the cables are really high quality, but on the bottom of the base, the cables are just too long and you have to figure out how to organize them on your own. Yeah, definitely the cable management can be a little bit improved, but it's still not terrible. And the last thing, as for now, while I'm making this video, there are some bugs in the software. Fortunately, they will most likely improve this software over time and maybe even add more features, but as for now, there are small little bugs. It's really not terrible and you can definitely use it, but sometimes it freezes or you have to restart the Snapmaker Luban to get it working with the Wi-Fi connection to the printer. So yeah, I am really happy with the Snapmaker. I really like this machine. It is easy to use, it is really well designed, and if you are looking for such 3-in-1 solution, you don't really have so much space for 3 separate devices, or you just want a 3-in-1 machine, Snapmaker is definitely something that you should check out. I will put a link to the Snapmaker in the description and some things that I have made and some other useful stuff. If you have any questions about the Snapmaker, about things I have made, or literally anything you want to ask, you can leave that in the comments and I will answer. And that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, happy making, bye!